Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today always sought to learn more about the world. His personal studies eventually clashed with his scholastic teachings, causing him to reject traditional academia for a time, but years later he would earn a master's degree in history. All through his studies, he continued to focus on theology, mythology, and fables, and how they connected societies throughout time and regions. He is called writer of fantasy, creator of worlds, weaver of magic. We all need a little magic in our lives. So welcome to Authors Over 50, David F. Baylog.
Hello.
Hello, David. David, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your book?
Well, I didn't really plan on writing a book when I started writing the book. I've been playing role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, and other games like that since I was 13, and I was creating characters and creating worlds through all of that. And eventually, it was actually after finishing my master's degree. I had written so many research papers, so many essays that I wanted to write something for myself. I hadn't intended to turn into a novel. I just knew that I had all these stories that I'd built up over the years, and I started just writing down a few of them, and then they started to piece together. And before I knew it, I had a book. Well, okay, not before I knew it. It took 7.5 years to actually write it, but I didn't expect it to become a book until it was getting to that point.
Well, once you knew you had to write the book, how did you proceed?
Once I realized it was becoming a book, and I realized that the story was going to be much larger than a book, and I had to focus on breaking it down to just the story I wanted to tell at that point, realizing that it was going to be a trilogy over time. And I broke the story down into thirds. So again, like I said, I spent 7.5 years actually writing it, then another 2.5 years searching for a publisher, then another 1.25 years to actually get it out on the market. In the meanwhile, COVID happened, which slowed things down even more. So all in all, from the time that I started till the time I was published, it was about 11 years. And it was just, at that point, a matter of persistence. I didn't necessarily write every day. I didn't have any time limits. I didn't have, I have to get this done by the end of the year. Sometimes I would go months without actually writing anything, either because work was really busy, home life was really busy, or I just didn't have anything to write at that particular time. I've learned to follow my muse as I'm writing, so I don't necessarily write in order either. For my first book, I finished chapter 9 before I finished any of the others. So I didn't know it was going to be chapter 9 at the time. I just knew that I've got this chapter, and then I'll write something else. Then I'll write something else. And it's like a heavy rain on your windshield. You get little drops here and there, and sometimes you get one big spot that actually reaches over and grabs some of the other raindrops. And before you know it, everything congeals into a larger drop.
And I think a lot of us write different chapters and move them around and see where they fit. You know, we're also concerned with that first line, that first chapter, those first 50 pages that an agent might see. So we're always trying to move our chapters around and make that first one even better.
Yeah, I get that first impression.
I'm always interested in you people who have such grand worlds different than our own in your head. What's your inspiration for creating those worlds?
I think it probably goes back to the role playing, the medieval fantasy games mostly. And I've played so many characters over the decades, and I just wondered what it would be like to see some of them actually interact, because each one was in its own separate world when I was originally playing them. So I started with the one character, added more, added more. Some of them don't like each other. Some of them take a while to actually get along. Some of them never like each other, but that's the way everything works. And yeah, it was fairly basic at first. I wasn't really going deep into the world building. I decided on the kingdom. I decided basically how magic would work. And the more I was writing, the more I felt I needed to push a few things. For magic, I created a language for it, and then had to put an appendix in the book so that people could see how to pronounce the words, how the language breaks down, what the words are that I used. Some of my fellow authors have, said that they want me to write a conversational dictionary for us. I'm not ready to build it to that point yet, but I've got enough for the magic that I'm using in the world. As I was putting in, monsters that end up getting in the way, I started with some basic ones, reskinned them, rebuilt them. Same thing with the people and the other civilizations. I would just start with one little thing and just pick a direction and go that way, which, however, it seemed logical for those particular people to create their society. So it was a little at a time. It was no grandiose plan right at the beginning. All I knew was I had a forested region. It was a small kingdom, and let it build as the ideas popped into my head, usually while driving.
Well, it sounds like a very well thought out kingdom for sure. My son is a big gamer, and I always thought that his claim to fame would be writing his own game, but now I'm hoping he'll become a writer like you and go past the games and create a book for me to read. After you got your kingdom fleshed out, how did you determine the plot of your book?
Um, well, I decided that it was going to be the life story of the one character. So the entire thing is written as a memoir. So which also means it's all written in first person. And in the first book, he's still a teenager. It's about ages 13 to 17. So remembering what it was like to be a teenage boy and to be pretty much oblivious to what else is going on around me, that forced me to have the character have to learn things from other people, because he doesn't necessarily see things the same way as other people do, isn't always clued into the cues of society, as to what means what, and the subtle meanings, the way the way people will look at each other, or the way people will converse. He's kind of stuck in his own little teenage ego, and it takes the other characters to push him beyond that. So as I was telling a story, I wanted to give him his coming of age, to see him grow up and start to become more than just the whiny little brat that he could have been otherwise.
Were most of your characters inspired by the games that you have played, or were you inspired by any real people, real life people?
Probably a little bit of both. They were all played in the game, but personalities came from other people. Some of them came from me. They were just aspects of myself I wanted to focus on. Whereas Mithran is almost pure intellect. So I just focused on he's intelligent but isn't socially aware. Glitter is intelligent and socially aware, but has her own other issues. Bondro is strong, has a nice presence, but isn't magically inclined the way the others are. And so each character, I got to pick an aspect of myself and tie it with other people that I know, and just blend them into other characters. So no one character is any one person, or specifically me or specifically somebody else.
I always think about magic and think, what would I want to have? What would my superpower be if I, could choose? And I think I always wanted to fly. Now, maybe that I'm older, I might want to be invisible. But what would you choose to be your superpower or your magical?
I've played around with this. One of the games I played years ago also is Marvel superheroes. I've been reading comic books for almost as long as I've been doing role-playing games. And I determined that telekinesis is for me at least, is the best power, because you can use it for other things as well. You can fly telekinetically. You can be super strong because you're using your mind rather than your muscles. You can manipulate matter. You can turn things into other things through telekinesis. There is a lot you can do with it, as long as you're clever with it. But if nothing else, the idea of cleaning the house and not having to get out the vacuum at this point, it's like, if I could telekinetically do the dishes, that would be great.
That's very good. I might have to add that to my list of magical traits that I would like to have. Tell us about your publishing journey, the challenges, what worked and didn't work, and if you have done any publicity or marketing.
The publishing journey was a long process, because I spent 2.5 years searching for publishers. I went online, I found lists of fantasy publishers, contacted many of them. Many I didn't hear back from. The ones I did hear back say, "Oh, we like your book, but we don't think it'll make enough money for our company. So thanks, but no thanks." Then I learned how to better craft a query letter, because I was new. I didn't know a whole lot, and I did more research and went, "Oh, yeah, my query letter isn't all that great. So let me rewrite that," and that got me more notice, better information, and eventually I came into Rock Hill Publishing, and they said, we like your story, we like your book, send it over," and they went ahead and published me. As of May 1st of this year, I am now a publisher, and so I've left Rock Hill and still on good terms. We still talk and we still do things, but two of us left to form a Little Lion Press along with a friend of ours, because she was founding the company and realized it's a lot of work for one person to do on her own. And we wanted to start a company where we could help new authors get their start in the same way Rock Hill Publishing helped us get our start. In 2020, in the middle of COVID, we had 5 authors release our first books. Things slowed down after that, part because of all the difficulty in doing all of that. And now we're working on second books, so it was harder to bring new authors in. So we formed this so that we could do the same thing, is to help new authors build a foundation, get their start, and get out there. Since the book has come out, what's worked best for me is actually getting out and meeting people in person, which I'm so happy that we could do now. I couldn't do that the first year that my book was out, but I'm doing a lot of live shows, conventions, craft fairs, art shows, gaming conventions, comic book conventions. Those are all good for fantasy books, and just meeting people face to face, being able to talk to them, and signing my books for them. It's been a lot of fun. I'm actually doing a show this coming weekend.
I think you've definitely found your niche with with all of those shows that you go to, and your audience is certainly there. And I love that authors now have so many options, and we can think outside the box and find places where our books fit. Is your publishing company just publishing fantasy novels, or do they do other genres as well?
Well, the company just started last year, and it started with just Jasmina, who has a fantasy book and a poetry book. And with Haley and I joining her, that's bringing in two new fantasy books. We've been reading submissions from other people. It looks like it's mostly fantasy. We will be looking to expand into other genres, but right now we're mostly focused on the fantasy because we're all three of us are already fantasy authors, so it's easy for us to understand as we get new fantasy submissions. I love science fiction as well. So as science fiction comes in, I'll probably end up taking the lead on those more so than the other two. And if it's more of a work of literary fiction, that's something that probably Jasmina will pick up more. Yeah, Haley has her specialties outside of fantasy as well. So as things come through and as we open up for more, but we're trying to take it slow and not overwhelm ourselves.
Yeah. Well, that's very exciting. Your own publishing house.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's a little nerve wracking, but when we're still in that transition period, since it's only been a week and a half since actually joining in with this company, so it's a little bit of a process. I have to get new ISBN numbers for our books after leaving Rock Hill. So, but mid-May is when the ebook should hit Amazon again, and then the new printed copy should be out sometime near the end of May, beginning of June.
Well, why don't you read a few paragraphs for us so that we can hear your tone and voice in your book?
For those actually watching, I have to put my glasses on because
we're over 50.
Because we're over 50. And the LASIK, I got LASIK, and it was great for 14 years. And now my brain is trying to figure out why I'm suddenly a little bit farsighted where I was nearsighted my whole life. This is a little bit at the beginning. It's a short flashback. He's thinking about, how, just part of some of the difficulties in his life as he's talking to the wizard that will train him. I was searching along the edge of the forest for good wood for the hearth, as it was one of my daily tasks. Father had built a small two-wheeled cart, which I could either push or drag along to make the task easier once he realized, with great verbal disappointment, how little wood I could carry on my own. It was no great difficulty finding twigs for tinder, but Father was quite clear on what constituted a good log for burning. Thick and dry, he said. It's fine to have it be wet on the outside, but it can't be green or rotted inside because it won't burn right. After gathering about half a cartful, which was at least 3 times what I could carry, I heard something moving towards me from the forest. It's not common to spot deer, squirrels, or other creatures moving about. They do not typically approach humans. When I realized that I no longer heard the birds singing, I knew there was trouble afoot. My heart began to race, and my stomach felt like I had eaten a red-striped mushroom. I turned to grab the cart so I could race home when I saw a pair of men walking out of the forest. They were exceptionally thin and wore rags over their taut yellow-gray flesh. Then the smell hit me. The stench of decaying meat filled the air around them. My stomach turned over, yet retained its contents. They glared at me with malicious yellow eyes and hissed the word flesh while baring their long and jagged teeth. I let go of the cart and began to run, screaming for help. Within a few steps, I felt a heavy hand grab my shoulder. Its touch burnt and froze at the same time, and I found that I could no longer flee from these monsters. My feet would not pick themselves up off the ground, my arms would no longer swing to speed up my momentum, and I could no longer shout for help. All I could do was stand helplessly while the 2 creatures circled me, as if deciding which one was to claim the choicest bits. I knew that I was as good as dead, and I prayed that my family would live well in my absence. Just as one of the Volzu reached out for my eyes, I think we can stop there.
You left us hanging.
Always leave them on a cliffhanger.
That was great. That's very visual. I can picture us all being there watching that. So thank you. David, do you make time to read for pleasure?
I have more so lately. While I was writing my book, I wasn't reading at all, in part because there's so many good books with so many great ideas. I didn't want to accidentally plagiarize anything. Once I'd gotten the first book done, started writing the second, I started giving myself more time for reading again. I was still reading comic books because it's completely different genre, but I, now I feel more confident in my writing. I feel more confident that my ideas are my ideas, and I'm not going to accidentally pick up other people's ideas and write them in and have somebody claim, "Well, I just read that in somebody else's book, and you stole that." I did. Whoops. Um, but now that I have, I have the experience, and I have, you know, I feel better about that. I'm more comfortable reading now than I was before, and I missed reading so much. I felt really bad to put all my books aside for so long, and now I'm picking everything up again, particularly from other indie writers, which you know the the big publishing companies don't give us enough credits, and the more I'm reading, the more I'm just happier with the small press.
There's so much interesting work out there, and I think that's how writers feed ourselves is to read others' work. But I'm like you, I don't want to pick up anything that might stream from my subconscious later. So I try to read outside the genre that I'm writing at the time. Do you have any authors that you suggest to people who are writing fantasy or want to write fantasy or science fiction?
Well, for modern, I would of course suggest Haley Kilgore because she's my partner, and we just have a lot of fun working together. For even I write dark high fantasy, but for a little darker, getting more towards the horror aspect, Cassandra Thompson does a. I love her stories, and it's the genre I'd be writing if I wasn't writing this. It's kind of horror mythological. A lot of history in there. It was the next thing I planned on writing was something that she'd already written, so I put that project off to the side. Um, James Brumbaugh, I've been reading. He's another indie author. He actually lives in the same town as me. We found each other on Twitter, and it's like, oh, we're on the opposite corners of the city, but it's like, oh, well, this is fun. So every now and then we get together and meet for drinks. Hot chocolate. Neither of us drinks alcohol. um, for more mainstream, I was originally inspired by David Eddings, and I hadn't read his books in a while, but I've realized just how much influence he's had on me, particularly my magic system. Even though I was a teenager when I read his books, that still seems to have carried in, all through this time. Other good fantasy authors, R.A. Salvatore, of course, Hickman and Weiss, but a lot of those are the D&D fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons type fantasy, which of course influenced everything that I did.
It's influenced a lot of people, and a lot of work came out of that one game.
Yes, it did.
Our writers over 50 are such a unique set. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above? Anything that you wish you'd heard when you started out?
Just enjoy the process. Don't worry about, I didn't start writing until I was in my 40s, or I didn't start until my 50s. I hadn't planned on writing a book, and now I have one, and I've started a new career in doing so. If you have a story to tell it. Whether you get published or if you're just writing for yourself, allow yourself to write. It doesn't matter if it's poetry, science fiction, if you want to be the next Jane Austen, whatever your heart calls for, go ahead and do it. Just allow yourself to enjoy it.
I think that's great advice for our writers and for our listeners who want to begin writing. They say that we baby boomers are never going to stop working, that we're going to always have work, that we value work. And I think writing is something that we can do far into our old age. I've interviewed people in their 80s and 90s, and they're still turning out beautiful work. So as long as you have the imagination that you do and write the fantasy worlds that you write, you're going to stay young for a long time and be able to tell lots of great stories. So thank you so much, David, for being with us on Authors Over 50.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.